Hey, friend, welcome to the Good Gets Better podcast. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about our attention and how important it is that we focus on the right things. But before we get into it, let's take a second and pray together. Dear Lord, thank you for another day. Lord, I pray that throughout this day today, that you would help us to remain focused on you and what you've called us to do. God, there are so many distractions out there, and the first tactic that the enemy uses is to distract us. Because if the enemy can't get to us, if he can just distract us from you and keep us from advancing in our relationship with you and keep us from our tasks that you've called us to do, then he is winning a little bit. And so, Lord, I just pray against that right now because, Lord, it is a blessing to have this day. It is a gift that we woke up this morning. So help us to remember that and to not forget all that you've done for us. Lord, give us an excitement, a zeal, and a joy towards the work that you have called us to do. Please bless this day, bless our mindsets, and we just give this whole week over to you. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. In Proverbs 4, verse 25 through 27, it says, "Look straight ahead and fix your eyes on what lies before you. Mark out a straight path for your feet. Stay on the safe path. Don't get sidetracked. Keep your feet from following evil." The difference between undivided attention and sidetracked attention is the difference between a straight path, a safe path, and a windy path that is a little bit more dangerous. You get to the same place regardless, but the windy path is going to take you much longer than the straight path. Because if you stay focused on where you're going and on what you're doing, you're going to get it done much quicker because you're going right ahead. But if you get distracted and sidetracked, you are doing a bunch of random things and that keep you from finishing your task, and then it takes you so much longer. Distractions literally steer you away. When you're riding like a bicycle, for example, you're supposed to look straight ahead. Look in the direction that you want to go. Because if you look to the left or the right, then you're going to start going to the left or the right. But if you start staring down at where you are in the present moment and you're just staring at your bike, then you're going to end up twisting the bike and it's going to mess up your direction. Or if you're looking behind you while you're riding your bike is going to automatically start turning or swiveling, or you just might completely stumble and fall. And that's why the safest place to look when you're riding a bike is ahead of you, because that's where you're planning on going. But the point is that if you look too long in any direction that isn't where you want to go, you're going to end up losing control and crashing. And if you compare that example to different distractions, looking to the left or the right is kind of like comparing yourself to other people and then looking at where you are, like looking down in the present. You're focused on what's going to benefit you today rather than what's going to benefit you tomorrow or in the future. To me, that's like wasting an entire day just lounging around, not really being productive or doing anything that's going to help you out tomorrow, procrastinating, things like that. And then if you're looking behind you, then that's like you're more focused on the past. And if you are too focused on the past, then the enemy is just coming at you with things like shame and regret, which are things that you should leave behind you because you've already moved on past that. So there are better things out there for you than the past and what was behind you. All of those things steer you away. But if you keep your focus on where you want to go, then you're going to get there much quicker and safer. There's actually a really good example of this in Matthew 14, verse 24 through 32. It says, "Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. In their fear, they cried out, 'It's a ghost!' But Jesus spoke to them at once. 'Don't be afraid,' he said. 'Take courage, I am here.' Then Peter called to him, 'Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water.' 'Yes, come,' Jesus said. Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. 'Save me, Lord,' he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. 'You have so little faith,' Jesus said. 'Why did you doubt me?' When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. Then the disciples worshipped him. 'You really are the Son of God,' they exclaimed. In this story, Peter gets sidetracked and distracted by the wind and the waves around him that he loses his focus on Jesus and begins to sink as a result. And what I find so cool is when Jesus responds, he's like, "Why did you doubt me?" And he says, "You have so little faith." But what was it that Peter did? He got distracted. He got sidetracked and he lost his focus from Jesus. And what I find so interesting about that is that doubt and lack of faith is being compared to being distracted or sidetracked, which I had never considered before, but it's such a good point. So let's say that you took an hour of devotional time with Jesus in the morning, and throughout that hour, you keep getting distracted by things around you or your phone or the time. And from that devotional time, you might even leave feeling empty or like you didn't learn anything new. But if you spent that hour entirely focused on Jesus, without thinking about anything else around you, without being on your phone at all, and you were completely in his presence, you were literally present mentally with him. Because how can you be in God's presence if you aren't mentally present there? The amount of fruit that you're going to get from being present with Jesus is so much more than the amount you would get from Jesus being present with you, but you not being present with him. And I think that is so important. And I see a big difference in how I feel after I spend time with Jesus, where I'm fully in it mentally and just fully being present with him, rather than me sitting there reading a couple scriptures and then scrolling on my phone and then putting my phone down because I realized I got distracted and then reading it again and then saying, "Oh man, the time ran out. Looks like I gotta go and get ready for the day now." I get virtually nothing from that. I may remember a scripture or two, but I won't leave feeling filled, and my cup isn't going to be overflowing because I didn't spend enough time in God's presence. It's like when you're getting gas. The only way that you get a full tank of gas in your car is if you completely keep pumping and you hold on to it until it stops because the car is full. It's the same with us or with our phone battery. If we just plug it in and then don't keep it there, we unplug it, then the phone is not going to be completely charged because you just kept unplugging it. Another thing that I got from that passage is to not get in your own way. Because when I think about Peter, when he was leaving that boat, he was full of faith that he was going to walk on that water, and he was walking on the water. He was walking in a miracle toward Jesus, fully focused on him. But then when he allowed himself to start looking elsewhere and getting distracted by the storms around him, that's when he sunk. So sometimes in our own life, we may fully believe that Jesus has us, fully trust him with our situation, but then if we lose our focus off of Jesus and off of his ability, and we start to think about everything that's going on and how difficult the situation it is and how impossible it is all of a sudden, or all the things that could go wrong, then you are much more likely to be just like Peter and sink because you're not keeping your focus on the right thing. And as soon as he stops keeping his focus on Jesus, that's when he stops walking in the miracle. And I don't ever want to stop walking in the miracle. I want to keep my eyes fixed on Jesus and do incredible things with him. But the first thing that the enemy's going to try to do when he's trying to get to us is distract us. Because if he can distract us with other things and keep our focus away from God long enough, then we're going to sink just like Peter did. Sometimes we believe that it's possible for God to do impossible things in our lives and with us. And then God begins to do something really cool with us, and we are so excited. It's a great time. But then as we start to focus on various things, we begin to give up as we think about everything that stands in our way between us and the goal or the prayer that we have or the impossible situation. And that's when you're sinking and you lose sight of the cool things that God is doing in you, through you, and around you. What you are giving your attention to has the power over where you're going to end up. If you are focused completely on Jesus and doing the work that pleases him, then you are going to see so much fruit in your life. As I was talking about earlier, I found it very interesting how a lack of faith and the presence of doubt was compared to Peter's distraction and the way that he got sidetracked. And so I started thinking about this verse, which is Matthew 21, verse 21 through 22. Then Jesus told them, I tell you the truth. If you have faith and don't doubt, you can do things like this and much more. You can even say to this mountain, may you be lifted up and thrown into the sea, and it will happen. You can pray for anything, and if you have faith, you will receive it. And if you view that through the lens of not being distracted, if you believe in Jesus and fix your eyes on him and focus on his ability versus your inability, then you can see the mountain moved in your life. I find sometimes if you focus too much on how big the mountain is, that is not focusing on God and his power over the mountain. And yeah, that mountain may be big, but God is bigger. And so focus on the one who can move it more than you and your inability to move it on your own. Because yes, it's true, you can't move that mountain. And it may be an impossible situation for you, but it's not impossible for God. And so you can give that mountain over to him, have faith by believing that he's got it, and you don't need to worry about how big the mountain is. You don't need to worry about how big the giant is. He's the one who provides the power and the strength to be able to take down the giant, to move the mountain. If you fix your eyes on the truth, then you're set, you're safe, you're confident. But if you start fixing your eyes more on the lies that the enemy wants you to listen to, then you're going to be thinking, oh man, this is difficult. I don't know if this is going to be actually happening. I don't know if God cares about me enough to move this mountain. so many different things that the enemy's going to try to whisper at you when you're trying to have faith in God to do something big. And the enemy's going to be loud because he wants to drown out the truth that God is speaking over you. He doesn't want you to have faith. He doesn't want you to move any mountains. He doesn't want you to slay any giants. So he's going to try to convince you that it's not possible and that your faith isn't enough when it is. And all you got to do is keep your attention fixed on God, keep your thoughts fixed on Him, and He can do it. Recently, I've been going to the gym and I've really been enjoying it, but it was definitely very difficult at first. It's a humbling experience for sure. But what I've noticed when I'm at the gym is when I believe that I'm able to do something, it is so much easier to follow through with it. But when I am, let's say I'm going to lift a weight that I know that my body can lift because it's happened before and I know that my muscles are strong enough to lift it, but in my mind, I tell myself, this is too heavy. This is going to be difficult. I'm going to give up so much sooner, or I might even go with a lighter weight because I'm convinced that I'm not able to do it. But if I actually believe, yes, I can do it, then it's going to be much easier for me to follow through and get through the workout. And what that shows me is the difference between speaking life over something and speaking death. There was even this movie that I watched one time, and I can't remember the name of it, but in this movie, it's a true story. There was a child who was going through some sort of really, really difficult thing like surgery, procedure. The chances of this person surviving were very, very low. And so what the mom did was she didn't allow anybody to speak anything but life over her child because she fully believed that if everybody spoke life over him and she kept praying to God that he would be healed. And long story short, he was healed. There is a scientifically proven fact that if you speak life over your plants, they will grow and thrive. But if you speak death over them and yell at them and get upset with them, they actually don't thrive. They wither a little bit, which is so interesting because if you think about us as humans, if you speak life into your situation, if you speak life into what you are facing, then imagine how much better your life will be. Not only because your mindset is swapped, but also because you're speaking life into your body and you're speaking life into other people. And it does exactly that. It gives life. But if you speak doubt and frustration and just negativity all the time, you're going to be affected by that, and so are the people around you. And if this happens to plants, imagine what happens to you and the people around you when you're speaking death over speaking life. But I just think it's so interesting how our minds have so much power over what we're physically able to do. Because if you tell yourself, I can't get out of bed this morning, you are going to have a very difficult time getting out of bed. But if you say, okay, I'm going to get up out of bed now, you're much more likely to get up out of bed just because you spoke life into it. Isaiah 26, verse 3 says, "You will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you." If your thoughts are fixed on Jesus, then you'll be at peace. He keeps in perfect peace all whose thoughts are fixed on Him. But when you're getting distracted, when you're constantly focusing on other things, then how are you going to stay in that perfect peace? And that doesn't necessarily mean that like you can't do anything else but think about Jesus, because obviously we have tasks in our day. We have things that we are called to do that we need to do. And so when we do those tasks, what I think that means is you dedicate your work to God. And when you dedicate your work to God, you work as though you're working for Him, you do your best work. And so when you are doing your best work for God, you're not going to continually get distracted and get sidetracked and scroll on your phone because you're trying to honor God with your work. And if your boss came out, like at work, and saw you just scrolling on Instagram while you were supposed to be doing other things, you would get in trouble. And so if you start to view what you are dedicating to God in that same light, then it should have a very similar sense of urgency and dedication because you are working to please God. And when you're working to please God and doing your best work, then you're going to be driven, passionate, focused on your work until your work is completed. Just imagine how much closer you can get to Him if you are fully present with Him when He's present with you. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that this was an encouragement and motivational. I would super appreciate it if you rated this podcast and make sure to follow so you can stay up to date for whenever a new episode drops. I'll chat with you again soon, and I hope you have an awesome rest of your day. And just remember, when you focus on the good and when you focus on God, the good gets better.